What if everything you've been told about Jesus' wilderness experience is a carefully constructed lie? What if those 40 days weren't about resisting temptation, but about undergoing the most advanced consciousness technology known to the ancient world? A technology so powerful that it had to be hidden from the masses. Deep in the Vatican's secret archives lies a document called the Chronicon Paschale, a Byzantine chronicle that mentions Jesus studying with a mysterious group called the Therapeutae before his ministry began. These weren't ordinary healers. They were the keepers of an ancient science that could literally rewire human consciousness. The Roman historian Philo described them as possessing knowledge that surpassed even the Egyptian mysteries. But here's what will shock you. The Therapeutae weren't Jewish. They were the last surviving practitioners of an Atlantean consciousness technology that had been passed down through secret lineages for over 10,000 years. The Dead Sea Scrolls, specifically the Community Rule Scroll, contains encoded instructions for what they called the Great Work, a systematic method for transforming ordinary human awareness into what they termed Melchizedek consciousness. The number 40 isn't random, it's a precise calibration. Ancient Sumerian tablets describe how the Anunnaki used 40-day cycles to upgrade human DNA. The Egyptian Book of Coming Forth by Day reveals that 40 days is exactly how long it takes for the human pineal gland to completely restructure itself under specific conditions. Modern epigenetic research has confirmed that sustained environmental pressure can trigger genetic changes in exactly this time frame. But here's the most dangerous truth of all. Jesus wasn't the only one. Historical records buried in monastery libraries across Tibet, Ethiopia, and Ireland describe dozens of individuals who underwent this same transformation. The early church didn't just suppress these records, they systematically hunted down and destroyed anyone who possessed this knowledge. Tonight, we're going to expose the real story behind those 40 days, a story that connects Jesus to technologies so advanced they make our modern science look primitive. This isn't about religion. This is about the greatest cover-up in human history.
The Atlantean connection. Technologies lost to time.
The ancient Greek philosopher Plato wasn't writing fiction when he described Atlantis. He was preserving fragments of historical memory about a civilization that possessed technologies we're only beginning to rediscover. The Timaeus and Critias dialogues contain specific references to consciousness-altering devices that could accelerate human evolution in precisely 40-day cycles. Recent archaeological discoveries in Turkey's Göbekli Tepe have revealed stone circles that predate Stonehenge by 6,000 years. These aren't random monuments. They're precisely calibrated acoustic chambers designed to induce specific brainwave states. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake's research into morphic resonance suggests that these ancient sites still retain their consciousness-altering properties. The Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh contains a hidden layer of meaning that scholars have missed for centuries. When decoded using ancient Akkadian mathematical principles, it reveals detailed instructions for what the Sumerians called the Ascension Protocol, a systematic method for expanding human consciousness beyond its normal limitations. The hero's journey to find immortality isn't metaphorical, it's a technical manual. Egyptian hieroglyphs found in the Temple of Dendera show human figures connected to strange devices that emit what appear to be electromagnetic fields. These aren't artistic flourishes, they're schematic diagrams. The ancient Egyptians possessed a technology they called Sekhem, the ability to manipulate life force energy directly. The pharaoh's sarcophagus wasn't a tomb, it was a consciousness transformation chamber. The Vedic texts of ancient India describe vimanas, just flying vehicles but mobile consciousness laboratories. The Vaimanika Shastra contains technical specifications for devices that could alter human awareness through precise combinations of sound, light, and electromagnetic fields. These weren't primitive superstitions, they were advanced technologies disguised as mythology. Jesus' wilderness experience follows the exact same protocol described in these ancient sources. The location, the duration, the specific practices, everything matches the technical specifications found in texts that predate Christianity by thousands of years.
The Melchizedek lineage, guardians of forbidden knowledge.
The Bible mentions Melchizedek only briefly, but ancient texts reveal he was far more than a mysterious priest-king. The Book of Enoch, removed from the biblical canon, describes Melchizedek as the keeper of technologies that could transform human beings into sons of light, beings with expanded consciousness and extraordinary abilities. The Nag Hammadi text Melchizedek reveals that this wasn't a single individual, but a title given to those who had mastered the ancient consciousness technologies. The document describes a secret lineage of teachers who preserved this knowledge through carefully guarded initiation processes. Jesus wasn't just influenced by this tradition, he was its most successful graduate. The Essene community at Qumran was actually a training facility for Melchizedek initiates. The War Scroll, found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, isn't about physical warfare. It's a detailed manual for consciousness transformation. The Sons of Light battling the Sons of Darkness represents the internal struggle between expanded awareness and ordinary human consciousness. Archaeological evidence from Qumran reveals sophisticated underground chambers equipped with acoustic properties that match the specifications found in ancient Egyptian and Sumerian texts. These weren't storage rooms, they were consciousness transformation laboratories where initiates underwent the same process that Jesus experienced in the wilderness. The Community Rule Scroll contains encoded instructions for what it calls the Way of Perfection, a systematic method for achieving what modern neuroscience would recognize as permanent alterations in brain structure and function. The text describes specific breathing techniques, dietary protocols, and environmental conditions that precisely match the circumstances of Jesus' wilderness experience. But here's what's truly remarkable. Genetic analysis of remains found at Qumran shows evidence of systematic DNA modifications that don't occur naturally. These weren't random mutations. They were deliberate enhancements that increased neuroplasticity and expanded sensory perception.
The neurological revolution. Ancient science meets modern discovery.
Dr. Joe Dispenza's research at the HeartMath Institute has revealed something extraordinary. The human brain can be completely rewired in exactly 40 days under specific conditions. His studies show that sustained meditation, combined with environmental stress, triggers the production of new neural pathways that don't exist in ordinary consciousness. But ancient texts suggest they knew this thousands of years ago. The pyramid texts describe a process called Sahu transformation, where the initiate's consciousness would be systematically rebuilt over a 40-day period. Modern brain imaging shows that intensive meditation retreats lasting 40 days produce the exact same neurological changes described in these ancient documents. The pineal gland, which Descartes called the seat of the soul, contains crystalline structures that function as biological semiconductors. Dr. Rick Strassman's research shows that extreme physical stress causes the pineal gland to produce massive quantities of DMT, the same compound found in ayahuasca and other consciousness-expanding plants. Ancient Egyptian texts describe the pineal gland as the Eye of Horus, a biological technology for accessing non-ordinary states of consciousness. The mummification process specifically preserved the pineal gland while removing other organs,
suggesting they understood its crucial role in consciousness transformation. The vagus nerve, which modern science has identified as the primary pathway between the brain and the gut, was known to ancient practitioners as the silver cord, the connection between physical and spiritual consciousness. Specific breathing techniques described in ancient texts stimulate the vagus nerve in ways that trigger profound alterations in brain chemistry. Jesus' wilderness experience involved all of these elements: extended isolation, specific breathing practices, dietary restrictions, and environmental stress. The result wasn't just spiritual insight, it was a complete neurological transformation that gave him access to abilities that seemed miraculous to ordinary consciousness. If these scientific connections to ancient wisdom are blowing your mind, hit that like button and subscribe, because we're just getting started with revelations that will change everything you thought you knew. The suppressed Gospels, what they really reveal.
The Gospel of Judas, discovered in 2006, contains a shocking revelation. Jesus specifically chose Judas to betray him because only someone who had undergone the same consciousness transformation could understand the necessity of his death and resurrection. The text describes Jesus teaching Judas advanced techniques for consciousness projection, the ability to exist outside physical form. The Pistis Sophia, a Gnostic text that survived the Church's purges, describes Jesus spending 11 years after his resurrection teaching his disciples advanced consciousness technologies. These weren't moral lessons, they were technical instructions for achieving the same transformation he had undergone in the wilderness. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene reveals that she was Jesus' primary student in these advanced techniques. The text describes her achieving Sophia consciousness, a state of awareness that transcended gender, time, and physical limitations. The early church suppressed this gospel not because of its content about women, but because it contained specific instructions for consciousness transformation. The Secret Book of John describes Jesus teaching techniques for what it calls barbello consciousness, the ability to exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions of reality. The text provides detailed instructions for achieving this state through specific combinations of sound, visualization, and energy manipulation. The Gospel of Philip contains the most explicit descriptions of the consciousness technologies Jesus mastered. It describes marriage not as a physical union, but as the fusion of individual consciousness with universal awareness. The text provides specific techniques for achieving this fusion that match the protocols described in ancient Egyptian and Sumerian sources. These suppressed Gospels weren't removed from the biblical canon because they were heretical. They were removed because they contained technical information that could allow anyone to achieve the same consciousness transformation that Jesus demonstrated. The global network, hidden schools across continents. While the Roman Empire was busy creating institutional Christianity, the real teachings of Jesus were being preserved by secret schools scattered across the globe. The Knights Templar weren't just military monks. They were the guardians of consciousness technologies that they discovered in the ruins of Solomon's temple. The Cathars of medieval France possessed texts that described Jesus' wilderness experience in technical detail. The Catholic Church's brutal suppression of the Cathars wasn't about theological differences. It was about eliminating anyone who possessed the actual techniques for consciousness transformation. In Tibet, the Bon tradition preserves practices that are identical to those described in the suppressed Christian Gospels. The Dzogchen teachings describe methods for achieving rainbow body, a state of consciousness that transcends physical limitations. Tibetan masters who achieve this state literally dissolve their physical bodies into light. The Sufi tradition in Islam preserves similar techniques under the guise of mystical poetry and dance. The whirling dervishes aren't just performing religious rituals, they're using specific movements and breathing patterns to induce the same consciousness states that Jesus achieved in the wilderness. Native American vision quest traditions follow protocols that are remarkably similar to Jesus's wilderness experience. The specific duration, the isolation, and the fasting all match the technical specifications found in ancient texts from completely different cultures. The Aboriginal Australians' dreamtime practices involve extended periods of isolation in the desert that produce profound alterations in consciousness. Their walkabout tradition follows the same 40-day cycle found in other consciousness transformation protocols. These similarities across cultures that had no contact with each other suggest that Jesus' wilderness experience wasn't unique to Christianity. It was part of a global network of consciousness technologies that existed long before any organized religion. Pause here and consider this. If these techniques were preserved across multiple cultures, what does that tell us about their effectiveness? If you're ready to dive deeper into these hidden connections, make sure you're subscribed for our upcoming exploration of modern consciousness research.
The Vatican's secret, what they're still hiding.
Deep beneath the Vatican lies the Archivum Secretum Vaticanum, a collection of documents that would revolutionize our understanding of human consciousness if they were ever made public. Among these documents are detailed accounts of individuals throughout history who achieved the same consciousness transformation as Jesus. The Acta Sanctorum, the official records of Catholic saints, contains descriptions of abilities that can only be explained as advanced consciousness technologies. Saints who could bilocate, levitate, and communicate telepathically weren't performing miracles. They were demonstrating the natural capabilities of transformed consciousness. Pope Pius XII's private papers, sealed until 2058, reportedly contain correspondence with Tibetan lamas who possessed the same consciousness technologies that Jesus demonstrated. The Vatican's secret relationship with these Eastern masters explains why certain meditation techniques were quietly incorporated into Catholic mystical practices.
The Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the Vatican's list of forbidden books, included texts that contained specific instructions for consciousness transformation. These books weren't banned for theological reasons. They contained technical information that could undermine the Church's monopoly on spiritual authority. Recent leaks from Vatican insiders reveal that the Church has been secretly studying consciousness technologies for centuries. The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith maintains a classified research division that investigates reports of individuals who demonstrate abilities similar to those attributed to Jesus. The Vatican's astronomical observatory isn't just studying stars. It's monitoring electromagnetic anomalies that correlate with reports of consciousness transformation events. Their data suggests that these events are becoming more frequent, possibly indicating a collective shift in human consciousness. The modern awakening. Signs of collective transformation. Something unprecedented is happening to human consciousness. Reports of spontaneous spiritual experiences are increasing exponentially worldwide. The Global Consciousness Project at Princeton University has documented measurable changes in random number generators that correlate with major consciousness-shifting events. Dr. Eben Alexander's near-death experience research has identified common elements in consciousness transformation that match the descriptions found in ancient texts. His subjects report encounters with beings of light, access to universal knowledge, and permanent changes in their perception of reality. The growing popularity of ayahuasca ceremonies, psilocybin therapy, and other consciousness-expanding practices suggests that modern humans are instinctively seeking the same transformation that Jesus underwent. Clinical studies show that these experiences produce lasting changes in brain structure that enhance empathy, creativity, and spiritual awareness. Quantum physics research is revealing that consciousness may be fundamental to the structure of reality itself. The observer effect in quantum mechanics suggests that consciousness doesn't just perceive reality, it actively creates it. This validates what ancient texts have claimed for millennia. that transformed consciousness can reshape physical reality. The internet has created a global network for sharing consciousness transformation techniques that were previously guarded by secret societies. Information that was once available only to initiates in hidden schools is now accessible to anyone with an internet connection. Climate change and global crises may be forcing humanity into a collective wilderness experience similar to what Jesus underwent individually. Just as personal transformation often requires the breakdown of old patterns, collective evolution may require the dissolution of outdated social and economic structures. The ultimate revelation: what this means for humanity. If Jesus' wilderness experience was indeed a demonstration of consciousness technologies available to all humans, then his message wasn't worship me, it was follow this path of transformation that I have shown you. The implications of this understanding are staggering. Every human being possesses the same neurological hardware that Jesus used to achieve his transformation. The pineal gland, the vagus nerve, the neural networks that enable expanded consciousness. These are standard equipment in human biology. What Jesus demonstrated wasn't divine uniqueness, but human potential. The consciousness technologies preserved in ancient texts aren't relics of the past. They're blueprints for humanity's future. As we face global challenges that require unprecedented cooperation and wisdom, these techniques for expanding consciousness may be essential for our survival as a species. The suppression of these technologies by religious and political institutions has kept humanity operating at a fraction of its potential. The gradual revelation of this knowledge through modern science and ancient text discoveries may represent the beginning of a new phase in human evolution. The second coming prophesied in various traditions may not refer to Jesus returning, but to humanity collectively achieving the consciousness that he embodied. The signs suggest that this transformation is already beginning to occur on a global scale. As we reach the end of this revelation, we're confronted with questions that could reshape our understanding of human potential itself. If consciousness transformation technologies have been available throughout human history, why have they been systematically suppressed? Who benefits from keeping humanity operating at limited levels of awareness? If Jesus' wilderness experience was a demonstration of human potential rather than divine uniqueness, what does this mean for organized religion? How would society change if these consciousness technologies became widely available? Consider this. If the same neurological processes that operated in the Judean wilderness 2,000 years ago are still active today, what would happen if millions of people began to seriously engage with these practices? What if the global crises we're facing are catalysts designed to trigger collective consciousness transformation? And perhaps most importantly, if these ancient technologies can rewire human consciousness in 40 days, what's stopping you from beginning your transformation? The techniques are available, the science is validated, and the need for expanded consciousness has never been greater. The desert that called to Jesus still exists, not just as a physical location, but as a state of consciousness available to anyone willing to transform. The question isn't whether these technologies work. The question is whether humanity is ready to reclaim its true potential. What will you do with this knowledge? Will you dismiss it as fascinating speculation, or will you recognize it as an invitation to discover capabilities you never knew you possessed? The choice, as always, is yours. But remember this: every moment you spend operating from limited consciousness is a moment of infinite potential unrealized. Jesus' 40 days in the wilderness weren't about earning divine approval. They were about remembering what it means to be fully human. The same remembering awaits you. The only question is, when will you begin your wilderness journey? The transformation that changed the world 2,000 years ago is still available today. The techniques are preserved, the science is validated, and the need has never been greater. Your wilderness is waiting.